Assalamu alaikum and very good morning, very good afternoon, very good evening. Do you have participants from many countries? I see even in the chat box. First of all, let me take the opportunity to congratulate and thank the Postgraduate Student Society of Universiti Teknologi Malaysia for organizing this webinar. So that's the title for today's webinar, Defining Research Problem and Developing Theoretical Framework. Let me start with Albert Einstein, one of the greatest scientists in our age. He has said that basically the formulation of the research problem is often more essential than its solutions. So formulation of research problem is more important than the solution because the solution is dependent on the identification or definition of the research problem. I will just give simple example. If you are not feeling well, you are unhealthy, and you go and see the doctor, if doctors fail to diagnose the disease correctly, it doesn't matter how expensive, how efficient medicine is given to you, you won't be cured. So the problem got to be identified well. And same goes to research. If you are undertaking a research, we have to make sure that we have identified and defined research problem correctly. That will determine the procedures later on, the subsequent stages and procedures. And that will determine the kind of solution that we are going to have. So research is undertaken when there is a problem and the problem requires a solution. There are many problems out there. When you are living at home, you are outside home, you are in the office, you are playing games, you are traveling, you are mingling around with friends, you are socializing, networking, whatever. We see there are many problems. Every moment we do things, we always encounter problems. But not all problems require solutions. Okay, so we have to have problem that requires solution, something that bothers you really, something that bothers you, something troubles you, something creates problem for others, right? So something that requires or warrants solution, that is a problem. And a research got to be undertaken by identifying and defining that problem that requires a solution. But again, the process is very clear, right? As it is in the definition, the process has to be very organized, objective, and systematic. All right. So research got to be very organized effort with clear-cut objective, and the process got to be very significant from A to Z, from the beginning until the end. Now, this is how research is undertaken. If you look at it, it starts with a research problem where we state the knowledge prior to your research, right, or our research. So we start with what we have, and then we end up with adding what we don't have. Okay, so we start with a research problem or research question with the prior knowledge that we have, and at the conclusion, we state what we found from our research, and then we raise more questions. Problem. What is a problem then? Problem is basically a question raised for inquiry, consideration, or solution. So some kind of question that is raised, okay, for inquiry, for consideration, or for solution. So something that that affects us, something that bothers us, something of concern of industry and society, and that what requires some kind of solution. That's how we define problem. Now, what do we do with problem? Most of us, what do you do? Certain cases when we see a problem, we just ignore them until and unless it affects me or affects us seriously. Say, for example, you wake up in the morning and you have little leg pain, and you can still walk, you can still run, so you just ignore it. Unlike it's become so serious that you cannot really walk properly, then you run to the doctor for a solution, right? So it depends on the severity of the problem. So most of the time when we encounter a problem, that's what we do. Either we ignore them, we talk about them, or we try to solve them. So as a researcher, when you see a problem affecting society, industry, country, or the world affecting the humankind, then we try to solve it by doing a research. Okay. So as a true researcher, we got to be always inquisitive. Our mind got to be very inquisitive. We always have to think, why this happening? How can you solve this? What are the things that is contributing to this? How can you find some kind of solution that may help us to solve it? Okay, so that kind of inquisitive mind and thinking has to be developed as a researcher. That's the first prerequisite as a researcher. Mind got to be inquisitive. Anything we see beside us, around us, we have to question it. We have to question it. Now, so what is a research problem? So we say the research problem is an issue or concern that investigator presents and justifies in a research study. So you're looking at a concern, an issue, a problem that someone would like to research, anything that a person finds unsatisfactory or unsettling, a difficulty of some sort, a state of affairs that need to be changed. So that's how we are defining the research problem. And the problem involves in the areas of concerns to researchers for conditions they want to improve, difficulties they want to eliminate, questions for which they want to seek answers. Okay, so when you are undertaking research, when you say most of the time, that's the problem we see with the candidates in the final viva voce. Even though the candidate has gone through proposal defense, the candidate has gone through pre-viva, and in the final viva, when examiners ask the student to explain what is your problem, and we find many students cannot really provide satisfactory answers of the research problem they undertook. The research problem they identified and defined to undertake research. Now, some more, clear definition of research problem. We say it's a clear expression about an area of concern, a condition to be improved upon, a difficulty to be eliminated, troubling question that exists in the literature, existing practice points, solutions to points a solution, needed a solution, a question that researchers wants to answer, or a problem that researchers want to solve. Okay, so it is basically a research problem identification is like identification of destination before undertaking the journey. So without research problem, you cannot proceed. You got to have a problem, got to be identified. Research a problem got to be identified before you undertake the research. Okay, it's similar like when you are traveling, you got to have a destination. You cannot simply just come out from the house and drive. You do not know where to go. So if you are thinking of doing a research, so that's how it is. A research problem got to be identified and properly defined. Now, you may start thinking of something. So it comes from your own conscious, subconscious mind, right? So intuition. So you think of something, something going on, something is wrong. You have a feeling that something is not right, something is wrong. That comes from your intuition. Like intuition, based on the way you have been brought up, the way you have been educated, the way you have been brought up in the family, your networking and socialization of people, your working environment gives you some clue that something is not good, something is not right. So that's where you will start. Intuition. That's why you start. And then what we do with intention, then we experience it. It become better. So you understand something is wrong, and I experience it is happening now. So what do we do now? After that, we do little research. We do little reading of research papers or books or any other materials where I can try to figure out what is wrong, why it is happening. Is there any answers for these issues and all that? Okay. So you start with intuition from your own thinking, from your conscious, subconscious mind, and then you experience it a bit, and then you do little research, and then what you do, you consult with people who has the authority. So the similar example that I have given you, if you are looking at sexual harassment, say for example, earlier I just said harassment, now it become very specific, sexual harassment. So when you are working and you see that people are talking about it, some people are talking about it. And then while you are working, suddenly you experience it. You have seen some people are doing it. And or you see your friend or colleagues are complaining about it, or you have experienced it. Your boss, different sex, different gender boss somehow harassed you. So you experience it. So when you see that, then you continue doing little research, reading papers and reading books and all that related to harassment. And you see what is being done. Why is this happening? Why people do that? And there are many questions that you have in mind you try to identify. And once you have that consensus, those queries that you get by reading papers and all that, to confirm it, you consult with people with authority. So people from industry, people from academia, that's what you got to consult with. That helps you to identify. We have identified, and then now that helps you to define your research problem properly. Okay. Now, why it is so important to define research problem? As we say that a problem well defined is half solved, right? Same like Einstein said, right? Formulation is more important than the solution. So how the problem is framed determine what solution you are going to obtain, right? Research problem drive subsequent stages of research process, and the proper problem definition ensures research result will meet decision makers' objectives. So once research problem is defined properly, it will show you the later stages, whether your research is going to be a qualitative or quantitative, or whether you are going to take deductive approach or inductive approach, whether you are going to follow, what kind of analysis and all that. Research problem itself should be able, to provide that kind of guidance if it is clearly identified and defined properly. Okay. Now, again, why it is so important? Because it establishes the importance of the topic. I'm going to show you some example. How should you write? How should you write the research problem or problem statement? That's why I'm going to show this to you. Establishes the importance of the topic. It creates readers' interest, focusing on readers' attention on how the study will add to the literature. So, when you write research problem, the way you write it, people think that, oh, this topic is very interesting, very important, very relevant, very useful, very related to us, so he feels like reading more. So it creates readers' interest. So when it creates readers' interest and he read more, after that he has to feel that this research going to add something to the literature. I'm going to learn something new from this research. That feeling has to be there by reading the research problem of the statement of the problem. Okay, so itself will tell you that if you fail to write that way, you're bound to have a lot of problem during the final viva. I would say, even starting from proposal defense, you will encounter a lot of issues and problems if you fail to identify and define research problem correctly. Now, you got to justify a research problem, right? So when I say harassment, then I have to justify. I cannot simply just say that I know some harassments are taking place. I cannot do that, or I have experienced it. By doing that also, I cannot justify. Okay? So justification got to be based on what other researchers have found. That's number one. Your justification of research problem. Your identification definition, especially definition. Identification could be from your own, but the definition has to be done by using previous researchers' materials. That's number one. Number two, justification based on your personal or workplace experiences. So you have your justification based on previous research, and then after that, your justification based on your own experiences, so workplace experience. It doesn't have to be your personal, it could be just workplace experiences, getting from colleagues and friends and all that. And then justification based on experiences that others have had in the workplace, right? So the number two and number three, it must be guided by some statistical data. That's very important. We see many times in the final viva voce, students, they have a lot of support from literature to define the research problem, but they do not have sufficient support from the industry. So you need to have some kind of statistical data supporting that is happening. Okay, so if you type the harassment, as your topic. I will keep similar, same topic for the whole talk, so that it's easier for you to understand rather than switching different topics. So if we're talking about doing harassment, it is prevalent in every society, every country, every industry. Harassment is there. Okay. And when you research literature, you find a lot of evidence, a lot of studies being done. So you now justify with experiences of yourself or in the workplace, and then you have to have data from workplace harassment, so which are available in many syndicated sources where you can collect the data, statistical data. Okay. Now, once you identify and try to define the research problem, then immediately after that you have to proceed to the next stage. You have to locate the research problem. Okay. So by opening remarks, opening paragraphs itself, we need to have these answers of this question. What is the issue or problem? What controversy leads to the need of a study? That creates interest of the people, right? What concern is being addressed behind the study? Is there a sentence as like the problem being addressed in this study is, dot, dot, dot. That's how we'll start at the beginning of writing. So you have to locate the research problem itself from the very beginning. Like every movie that you watch, at the beginning, they will show this, they will create the plot for the movie. If you like it, you continue watching it. If you don't like the plot, you will just switch it off. A research problem is like that. It's that important. If you are good in identifying and defining it, then people will feel like it's something of very importance, something very significant. The finding is going to help us a lot. It is going to solve the problem that we see and face. That kind of things got to be there. Okay. So that's what you want as a researcher. You cannot simply take everything granted. You start questioning why, questioning how, when, where. Sort of questioning has to be there. Why? Because you would like to see some kind of solution. Determining whether a research problem should be researched. Now remember earlier I said there are many problems out there, but not all problems require research. Not all problems warrants research. Okay, there's certain specific problem there that is affecting society, industry, and all that, and we have to undertake research. So we have to ask ourselves. I put two questions only in the red, and under that I have sub questions. So can we study the problem? Can we study the problem? Do we have access to the research side? Do we have the access? Say, for example, you have evidence of sexual harassment in the manufacturing industry somewhere. Do we have the access to the site? That's the first question. Will you be able to collect the data? Do we have the time, resources, and skills to carry out the research? That's the next question that you got to ask. So now you are looking back at yourself, your abilities, your resources, your capabilities, your competence. You're looking at that. Rather, you have to look at your skills, your competence, your ability, your capability. All those got to be carefully analyzed before you undertake a topic to do a research. Okay. Now, the next question is, should we study the problem? The problem is there. Should we study? Does it advance the knowledge? That is the most important question that you have to ask yourself. If you are doing PhD, you will be struggling. You'll be sweating to answer this question. Does it advance knowledge? Is there anything new? Okay, is there anything new? Powers and all that. You have to prove that you are contributing something new to the body of knowledge. That's what is important. Huh? So when you are identifying and defining a research problem, you have to ask yourself, does it advance knowledge? Does it contribute to the practice? That's what the two most important elements that you look at. A PhD is given for either one contribution. Number one, theoretical contribution, new knowledge contribution. Number two, practical, contextual contribution. And number three, methodological contribution. Okay, in most of our research, methodological contributions are very, very insignificant. So most of the time we try to work with new knowledge contribution and practical contribution, which are much easier compared to methodological contribution. So whether your research problem is identified and defined properly, you have to ask question to yourself. Should I, study this problem? Should, I study this problem, and you have sub-questions there that will clarify your minds whether you should undertake this research or not. There's some other questions still there. For example, like, will you study fill a gap or void in the existing literature? Is there any gap and you would like to fill up the gap? Or the knowledge is there and you are going to prove that that knowledge is not correct, it's not implementable, it's not useful anymore, become obsolete already. That can be also done by research. Will your study replicate past study, but examine different participants and different research sites? And that's what most of you will argue most of the time. You will argue that research, thousands of research have been undertaken worldwide, but in my country context, in that industry, this research has not been undertaken. This theory has not been tested in that industry or that specific country, So you look at that. I'm going to show you some example later. Will your study extend the past research or examine the topic more thoroughly? So possibly you can conclude that researchers conducted this study and does not provide conclusive solution to the problem. So that requires a problem, a research. So that is the research gap you're finding out, right? Will your study give voice to the people not heard, silenced, or rejected in society? So this is something not many of us will do. Okay, we have to voice our concerns of people who are not given priority in the society. And that can be also a good area where it can be undertaken, research can be undertaken.